radiesthesia. It's such a difficult word to pronounce in English. It's actually a French word, radiesthesie, which comes from the Latin radius, which means radiations, the Greek word aesthesis, which means sensation. So it's about accessing radiations from the non-local realm by using human being sensories. We use it to access non-local information, to transmit remotely at a distance, to charge and recharge energetically, and to detect, such as locating missing people, to diagnose diseases, or even to figure out exact homeopathic remedies and dilutions for each specific individual. There are no limits to the applications of radiesthesie. It goes from the cellular level to the cosmic level. It's a sacred science whereby we use the human body and a pendulum to access and retrieve non-local information. It's a secret science that was developed over thousands of years ago in China, Egypt, Europe, but it was kept from the general population because learning radiesthesie triggers the evolution of consciousness, and it opens the portal to the divine and cosmic knowledge. So the knowledge of the use of the pendulum has been passed on from one selected person to another. For example, the pharaohs in Egypt and some kings only had knowledge of how to use the pendulum. The use of the dowsing rods, however, was taught to the commoners or to the masses because they wanted them to find water and minerals. So you need to know that there's a different methodology between dowsing and radiesthesie. That's why you can find historical evidence about dowsing and dowsing rods, but there's very little about radiesthesie and the use of pendulums. There are three major principles in radiesthesia. Number one, everything radiates energy waves, or we call them waveforms. You'll see that in radiesthesia, we have our own vocabulary. Everything from organic, inert, and even just shapes by themselves will emanate a specific vibrational signature, such as if you take a Hebraic letter, it will emanate a specific energetic signature. In radiesthesie, we deal with all types of what we call rays, waves, frequencies, from the cosmic to the telluric to the human energy fields, and all the others to include the man-made technology. Now, although this is an ancient science, when we fast forward into modern times, we find that Albert Einstein said that everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. You match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. Then we have physicist Michio Kaku, who states that according to quantum theory, everything vibrates. And William Tiller, who says that every organism or substance radiates and absorbs energy via a unique wave field, which then exhibits certain frequency and radiation characteristics. Whether animate or inanimate, there is a measurable extended force field that exists around all forms of matter. The second principle is that the human being is actually an instrument. And with specific training, we use and we develop intention, which is a critical component of radiesthesie. We use the unconscious to connect with the invisible realm or the holographic universe, as we do in remote viewing. We use our body, we use our heart, and we use our soul to receive the signals. Now, the pendulum acts only as an antenna and an indicator. Before I go on, I would like to define some terms that we use in radiesthesia. When we refer to the conscious part of the mind, we refer to the logical, rational, judgmental, and critical part of the mind that we have focused on with our educational system and developed, that's got a big ego. When we refer to the subconscious, that's the under the surface storage of emotional baggage, unresolved issues, etc. And when we refer to the unconscious, we refer to the portal to intuition. It's the portal to non-local information, and it is a natural function that we all have to a certain degree. It's our connection to the non-local realm. Unfortunately, this part of our mind has been totally ignored in our educational system and by society at large. However, the French professor Eugène Chevreul, who was a chemist and a member of the French Academy of Sciences, did a lot of research in radiesthesia. And he said that each type of thought produces a specific type of movement or field of energy, and that we use the unconscious to capture that information. Without the unconscious, radiesthesia does not exist. The third principle is the ancient principle of as above, so below. What does that mean? It means that there are two realms, but they are interconnected. There's the physical realm in which we live in, and there's the invisible cosmic realm with which we can connect into. Now, the ancient alchemists and the Egyptians knew about this, and they worked with forces in both realms, even though, believe it or not, they didn't have scientific proof that it worked. That didn't stop them from operating in both realms, and that's probably because mainstream science hadn't been invented yet. So, the separation between the two realms was created by mainstream science, who chooses to ignore two things: the connectivity function of the unconscious mind and the resonance capability of the human being. Why are they ignoring it? Because we can't prove it with mechanistic methodologies and instruments. Therefore, it does not exist. However, there's hope in some of the modern quantum physics propositions. For example, we find a correlation with Bohm, who says that there is an implicate and explicate order that exists in the universe. The explicate is manifested or unfolded and therefore visible. The implicate is enfolded and hidden or invisible. So Bohm also perceived reality as having two levels, and also perceived that the hidden one was of a deeper order. So now we begin to see the correlation with the previous slide of the ancient principle as above, so below. Now, we don't have time to get into the quantum physics of the invisible realm, but Russell Targ summarizes it quite well by saying that our reality is a hologram, whereby each region of space-time contains information about every other point in space-time. This information is readily available to our awareness. In the holographic universe of David Bohm, there is a unity of consciousness, a greater collective mind with no boundaries of space or time. So let's get back to radiesthesia. This is what happens. With intention, the human being tunes into a very specific, defined waveform or frequency in order to retrieve information from that unique energy field. Most of the signals that are received from that energy field are received by our sensories and also through the heart. And I recommend you read some of the research that has been done at the Heart Math Institute. So in effect, the human instrument enters into resonance with that specific waveform or frequency. The signals are processed through to the unconscious and the conscious, and there is an integration, okay? And that's very important. You don't have to say, oh, it's 3 o'clock on Saturday, it's time to do radiesthesia or meditate, and I'm gonna access non-local information. No, radiesthesia integrates that skill into your normal thinking process because it's a natural, normal thinking function. So the pendulum acts as an extension of the human instrument to indicate either a quantitative measurement or to generate qualitative information. It's as if you're using, your remote control to tune into a specific TV station. Now, most of you here probably can explain how it works. I have absolutely no idea. To me, this is really magic. I can't even begin to comprehend. But does that mean that I don't believe it works and that I'm not going to use it because I can't explain it? It's interesting because we can accept invisible technical energy, but we have a difficult time accepting invisible human energy. Let's talk a little bit about the pendulum. The shape, the size, and the material are critically important, okay? The basic characteristics, and again, we always want to focus on accuracy. It has to be neutral, okay? It should be pointed or cone-shaped, and it should be wood and not crystal. Why not crystal? Because crystal is an instrument, okay? It stores data. It is not neutral. You don't want any angles on your pendulum because angles create disturbances in the reception, and it will affect the accuracy. So here are some pendulums, which I call pretty toys, that are sold commercially. As you can see, the one on the left has angles. It's a crystal, and the one on the right is a beautiful piece of jewelry, but it's not going to work very well for accuracy. Now, you may wonder, how do we obtain a quantitative measurement using the pendulum? Well, we use what we call rulers. Here's an example of the famous ruler of Bovis. Bovis discovered that a healthy human being vibrates at 6,500 angstroms. And further research demonstrated that diseases have their specific energetic imprint. For example, tuberculosis will vibrate at 5,500 angstroms and cancer at 4,820 angstroms. So you can use this ruler for medical diagnoses, but we also use it for a more fun application, and that is to measure the vitality of the food that you eat. So because we vibrate at 6,500, it would be preferable to eat foods that vibrate within that region and preferably above than below. So for example, you can, compare an organic banana to a normal banana, and you place it on the left-hand side of the rule, and you follow the exact protocol to use the pendulum. You enter into resonance with that fruit or whatever you're measuring, and the pendulum, again, following the protocol, and I don't have the time to explain it here, will indicate a specific measurement in angstroms, and then you can take the other fruit and compare it and eat the one that is higher in vitality, okay? It's important to know that radiesthesia does have rigorous protocols. Most of the knowledge is still today passed on word of mouth, and that's how I learned it. It is different than dowsing methodology. We say that radiesthesia becomes a way of life. There's training. It's a lifelong training with exercises, lots of knowledge to learn. You develop your sensitivities. It becomes a transformational journey. You learn how to become neutral, how to become objective. You learn to discern if your conscious mind is influencing your reading or if you're receiving true signals from the non-local realm. And there's a very rigorous protocol on how to hold the pendulum and how to use the pendulum for maximum accuracy. There are beneficial rays and harmful rays in radiesthesia. The electric is harmful to humans because it drains the living cells. The magnetic are beneficial, and in the olden days, people took magnetic baths for curative purposes. Again, you may say, well, how do I use the pendulum to find whether something is electric or magnetic? Again, we use a ruler. This one is circular. It was created by Chaumery and de Belizal. And again, following the protocol, you can find out if the energy field is electric or magnetic. I'm going to talk about one specific ray, which is called negative electric green, to give you an example of how powerful these frequencies can be. Let's go back to Egypt in 3000 BC. The Egyptians were very knowledgeable about harmful waves and knew how to create a contained area which would emit a harmful wave, such as negative electric green, in the pharaoh's tombs. Okay, I have to hurry up here. Okay. So there were two Frenchmen, Chaumery and de Belizal, who did extensive experimentation replicating Egyptian radiesthesia setups that emitted harmful energies to protect their pharaoh's tombs. Negative electric green is the shortest and strongest of all waves. Okay, its power is greater than X-rays, and it was used to mummify flesh and vegetation. Here's poor Chaumery, who used Egyptian amplifiers, wooden spheres, to amplify energies, and wanting to see if negative electric green was actually harmful. Unfortunately, both Chaumery died from overexposure. You can do an experiment, place a piece of meat 2/3 up a pyramid, and it will mummify at that level, because at that level, a pyramid emits negative electric green. So the Egyptians used this. They were masters at knowing how to use this. They, for example, inserted a powerful poison into the center of the body near the solar plexus, and the mummified body transformed into an emitter and would emit this poisonous wave throughout the room to protect it from intruders. I have to rush along here. Oh, here's a very interesting finding. Archaeologists noticed that in some of the chambers in the pyramids, they were very, very humid, and they found cadavers of cats, rats, and insects and other rodents, which should have been rotting and rotted. However, surprisingly enough, they were mummified. How did that happen? Well, it happened because they had been mummified by the negative green, electric green ray. So radiesthesia is a powerful science and technique using the human energy potential to connect with and operate in the non-local realm. The training triggers the evolution of human consciousness. You need to know that there has been scientific research done, not in this country, but mostly in France, some in Germany, and a little bit in the UK. But for example, Professor Eugène Guillet from the University of Paris, he did extensive research on DNA using radiesthesia, and he published his findings in a book in 1990, okay? Nobody paid any attention about it, and I wanted to use this book in my course at the university, and I looked for it online, and it now costs $1,000. Okay, so what is happening to humanity here? Well, the mechanistic mind has produced the power evolution of high-tech tools and instruments. But meanwhile, history is repeating itself. We're still fighting wars. We're even fighting religious wars. So what's happening to the evolution of humanity, or is it evolving? I suggest that we need to do some scientific exploration into the human energy potential. But we need to move away from our mechanistic thinking. And we need to create new rigorous scientific methodologies to explore the human energy potential. Perhaps we can evolve humanity to a higher level and find solutions to stop violence and violent history from repeating. What's going to happen if we ignore the human energy potential and just focus on instruments and mechanistic thinking? What sort of future are we creating for ourselves? Are we going to become automatons? Einstein, many years ago, saw this coming, and he said, "It has become appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity." Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I feel compelled to point out that particularly in reference to the notion of electric rays being harmful and magnetic rays being beneficial, there literally cannot be such a thing as electric radiation without magnetic, or magnetic without electric. Electromagnetic radiation, the two forces are different manifestations of the same underlying reality, and all forms of EM radiation involve electric and magnetic fields oscillating in lockstep.
Yes, yes, and I knew somebody was going to come up with that statement. In 20 minutes, it's very difficult to cover everything, but this is a very important point. Again, the language in radiesthesia is different than the scientific language. We do use the same words, but they don't have the same definition. When we say electric and magnetic, it is just a label, and they're the wrong labels, I agree. And oftentimes I have thought of, myself relabeling these things so as not to confuse the scientific community. But the literature that is published, there isn't that much that is published, and they do refer it in those terms. So I'm still using the old language. So thank you, York, for that comment.
Okay, I know this is a question to be researched, and I appreciate that. But when you said the pendulum is an extension of the human instrument, my wife does this a lot, and she uses some of the pretty toys. It seems to get good results. So I'm wondering, does it really matter what the pendulum is if the brain is doing it, picking up the vibrations, so that maybe, subconsciously you are manipulating the thing based on what your subconscious is telling you rather than consciously trying to rig it to go one way or the other. So if that's the case, then does it really matter what the pendulum is made of?
Yeah, excellent question. And that's why there is intensive lifelong training so that you begin, so two things. Yes, it matters, the material matters, because as you get in-depth training to identify specific quantitative readings on a ruler, it does make a difference, okay? Now, you can pick up a pendulum and it will move, okay? And you made a good point. Is that sometimes the operator who, through wishful thinking, you can make the pendulum move with your mind. I have a series of exercises, and that's one of the basic exercises, is to see how you, with intention, can make that pendulum move. And then the exercises are, how does it feel when it's not your mind making it move? So by experiencing both, you can begin to discern between the two. A lot of operators who don't do the training, they have a feeling of what the result may be, and yes, they will influence the pendulum. Yeah.
I have a question, Dominique. You said that we are vibrating at 600 something, 50 or something nanometers, but it's wavelength of light. So what does it mean? And does it mean that every body has these 650 nanometers? What does it mean that we are vibrating with this frequency? It's light frequency. It's inaccessible for human body.
Okay, the research that was done identified that in a generality, healthy human beings tend to vibrate around 6,500. And on that scale of reference, okay, the disease energetic signatures are below that at specific readings.
But what does it mean? Again, this frequency is light frequency. Human body cannot vibrate with this frequency. What is this frequency referred to in the human body by this definition?
Why don't you ask me, during the break, because I'm not too sure I understand your question, but I do want to respond. So see me during the break. Thank you.
Yes, Dominique,
You mentioned that this has a very rigorous protocol in the usage of the pendulum, and I'm wondering if this protocol, the rigorous protocol that you're speaking about, is written down anywhere so that people can access that protocol and properly use the pendulum for either research purposes or for other purposes. And the second question is what is the title of that $1,000 book? Because why our organization WISE will make that available at much less than $1,000 or maybe freely available so that people can access it.
Oh, great. Okay, the question of protocol. No, they are not really written down anywhere. Like I said, I had to skip a few slides, but this science was rediscovered by two French colleagues, a physician and an engineer. And they did extensive research, and all the best research that has been done on radiesthesia is written in French and has not been translated. However, the actual protocols I have never found written up, okay? So I started to teach them myself, but I have to tell you, I just am teaching what I have learned that was passed on to me by word of mouth. And here is the book that I was referring to. It's a fascinating book, yes.
Just as you mentioned universally negative energy, the negative electric green, I'm curious, is there a universal positive life energy?
Oh, yes. Thank you for that question, because I didn't mean to say it's the negative green, electric green is universal. It is just one, one wave.
But it's universally negative. That's what I understood from your talk.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, it's bad for all life forms when I say universal.
Yes.
So
yes.
Is there then a singular positive
right.
energy to counteract it?
Thank you.
Or?
Yes. No, not really, because it depends on the individual. Each human being has a unique vibrational signature and has variations, and therefore what may be extremely good for you may be good for somebody else, but a different frequency and combination of wave would be even better for another person. So that's what's fantastic about radiesthesia, is that it doesn't go into generalities. It takes every single human being and thing to specific measurements or whatever. For example, in homeopathy in Europe, or in France I should say, you really don't buy the remedies off the shelf. The homeopathic remedies are done on a one-to-one basis, and still some homeopaths in France, for example, use the pendulum. They tune into the patient's unique vibrational field. They identify the disease. They can feel the intensity of the disease, where it's at. They can feel, for example, the liver function, if it's strong or weak. If the liver function is weak, then the remedy will be different and the dilutions will be different, etc., etc. That's a very good example of how radiesthesia is used.
A quick comment.
Excuse me?
3 copies of that book are now on Amazon for $227.
For $227? Oh, wow, it went down quick.
A quick comment with regard to the negative green. There's a vertical and a horizontal component, and the horizontal component is good, and the vertical component is the negative, and that's what did the mummification of Chamari. And in dowsing, there's mental dowsing and there's physical dowsing, and in radiesthesia, it is really the physical dowsing, in which you really don't, your mind doesn't really enter into it. You just get the thing moving. It either goes in a certain direction or rotate or not. And there's also, in terms of people learning about this stuff, there's also the whole aspect of biogeometry. And biogeometry teaches which wavelengths, or what type, wavelengths is, again, is not quite the right word, because it is detected through the pendulum in terms of the types of greens and purples and oranges,
you're referring
et cetera,
to Ibrahim Karim's work, who is an Egyptian, and in our contemporary times, he's the only person that I know of who really understands radiesthesia in depth. However, he has focused on one aspect only of radiesthesia and has done an incredible job. He has renamed some of the original terms and principles that Chaumery and de Belizal pioneered. For example, he calls the electric vertical, he calls the magnetic horizontal, etc. So it's a very, Ibrahim Kaim's work is very specific in one area, but it's, you know, he's done an incredible job.
Thank you, Dominique.
Okay. Thank you.